one and all, and listen to tales of excitement and adventure. Tales of daring heroes, savage monsters, and bards who just couldn't keep it in their pants. Tales of friendship, nobility, drunken foolishness, and unforgettable fun. These are tales of role-playing games, fair listeners, and this is Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Danishes and Dragons, your RPG morning show. My name is Ryan Howard. I am your host and king of the Boneheads. What the hell has happened to my head? Okay. And, this is Danishes and Dragons. If I seem a little bit out of sorts, it's because I had to restart the stream. For anyone who watches on YouTube, which is most of you who watch this show, that's what I'm doing here. So yeah, today we are going to be discussing different ways to start your campaign in whatever RPG setting or system you want to use. Basically just, talking about different philosophies, different ways to start, and busting a few myths as far as, whether or not things are cliched, whether they should continue to be done or should not continue to be done, because I've got strong opinions on that. And you guys have heard me talk a little bit about that. But, that's something that I care a lot about, and, something that I'm going to talk about, just, to let you guys know how I'm feeling about stuff like that. Before we get into that, though, this was what I was talking about when the first stream decided that it was going to crap its pants. I am not going to continue to do this Saturday stream on a regular basis anymore. For one, no one seems to want to watch it live. That's understandable. I should have seen that coming. It's Saturday morning. It's 9 a.m. where I am. I completely get why basically no one wants to get up this early. Especially on a Saturday. I don't think 9 a.m. is early, but I wake up at 6 a.m. every day. So, except on the weekends. On the weekends I wake up at 7. I'm a morning person, more so than an evening person. The kiddies are always asleep, Elfie. Always. Like, any hour that you could be like, it's 3 o'clock and the kiddies are still asleep. Yes. The kiddies will sleep as long as they possibly can because they're cats and that's what cats do. But the other side of this, that really is kind of prompting this change, making me want to, renew my focus on just the Monday show is one. I feel like the Monday show has kind of gone downhill in quality, the flagship show, and that's on me, honestly. I have been... You guys have heard me talk about this. For the past year or more, I've just been super stressed about different things, mostly related to being isolated from other people. Because, seeing other people on a regular basis is something that gives me energy. This move has been extremely stressful. Work has been extremely stressful. And I'm trying to shake things up. And one of the things that's going to change is I can't do this every single Saturday. If I want to review a game or something like that, I might dust this off. Might do a Saturday stream. More than likely, I'll just record something on YouTube. Use OBS, record the video, and then post it on YouTube. Maybe do some light editing to it to, make everything better. But for all intents and purposes, Danishes and Dragons is pretty much done. Again, might dust it off every now and then. But I'm not going to be, playing video games on here anymore, like I said at the beginning of the year. If there are topics that would normally be discussed on Danishes and Dragons, I'll probably just fold them into the main show so I can focus my energy there. But yeah, I just want to focus on getting good guests and making that one stream, as good as it can possibly be. The only thing that might prevent me from completely closing this down, and I might end up renaming this to Rollin Bones Paints or something like that, but every now and then I do want to try again on the paint stream. You guys can see behind me I've got my painting table set up now. So I have basically a painting space in my studio space. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. The Monday show's not going anywhere. It's still going to be the same thing. Might do a new intro for it, keeping the same music though. But yeah, that's kind of where I am as far as Danishes and Dragons goes. Alrighty, so with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about starting your campaigns. Starting a campaign it's difficult. Let's be honest. Thinking, how am I going to kick off a game that is going to continue? Unfortunately, a lot of people go continue without end, which is why your campaigns never finish, by the by. That might be a topic for another time, but, in fact, that might be something that could bring Tim back on to talk about having a definitive ending for your campaign, knowing basically how long you want it to go with a little bit of stretch in case, something doesn't get done in a session. That's the strategy that you should be approaching your campaigns with. You need to know when to end your story. And I say this from experience because the first campaign I had, I knew what the ending was going to be. I just didn't know how to get there. So there's a lot of aimless wandering around. But yeah, you need to know kind of where things are going to end. Well, I will save that for another video or another stream. So, starting your campaign. First and foremost, I want to knock down one of the stupidest is probably the wrong word, but something that I just find kind of ignorant and uninformed that people say when you're talking about starting a campaign, and that's that meeting in a tavern is cliched and you shouldn't do it. That's not true. If you are planning on starting a campaign where the party members don't already all know each other, you need to have them meet in some kind of central location. Preferably one where there's plenty of social opportunities, where someone could approach them and try to hire them for their services as mercenaries or adventurers or whatever it is your party's doing. You need to put them in some kind of social hub. And one of the best places to do that is a tavern, because not only do taverns offer the opportunity for players to approach one another and get to know each other, but they also present a chance for other people to approach, other people to come up and offer them quests or something like that. There's social opportunities all around. A tavern, in kind of the medieval structure of society that D&D is based on, taverns were kind of the cultural center of the world for a lot of people in a lot of villages. Taverns were where people went to discuss ideas, to socialize, have fun, hang out, all that stuff. So, meeting at a tavern, that's where people met. That's where that idea comes from. And, you see it play out in Fellowship of the Ring? Where do the hobbits meet the first member of their fellowship? At the Prancing Pony. They met at a tavern, and when they got to that tavern, that's where the story really picks up. So the tavern is a important concept in fantasy. It's a gathering place, it's a central hub, it's the best place to find out, where goings-on are. Typically, that's where you'll find something like a bounty board. There's usually some kind of posting outside of taverns that say, hey, need help, lost my dog, mysterious monster carrying off children, that kind of stuff. You see that in, like, the Witcher video games. You meet in a tavern is the, like, default setting for starting a D&D campaign for a reason. That's because meeting in a tavern is a super important, like, almost the best way to get an adventure started if you have a party who doesn't know each other. So I want to knock down that nonsense first and foremost before we jump in here. So, as part of your campaign, part of your planning, and this is something that you should get input from the players on, but you don't necessarily need to. You as the GM can decide for yourself, do the players know each other already, or have they never met before? You can decide that without having any input from the players whatsoever. If you want their input, cool. And if you decide, only... There's ways to mix this up. You can say, like, 2 or 3 of them know each other, but, there's one coming in who doesn't know any of them. That's perfectly acceptable. One of the campaigns that I played in recently, about a little over a year ago, actually almost 2 years ago, when we started the campaign, 2 of the players knew each other, or 2 of the player characters knew each other beforehand. They met the 3rd player character along the way, and then I came in the group and none of them knew my character. None of their characters knew my character. They had heard of him, but none of them knew him. So there's a way to kind of mix and match these, but the first decision you need to make is, does the party already know each other? Has the party already been formed? Now, if you want to skip kind of the introduction, the, everyone talking, kind of getting to know each other's characters, that kind of stuff, the best way to do it is to say, you guys already know each other. And you have to come up with some framework under which they would have all met that you can then give to the players for them to kind of build their backstories around. So, let's start with a few ideas around how to start a campaign where the players already know each other. So, the players already know each other. My favorite way to start a campaign where the players are already familiar with each other is in the middle of combat. Combat is one of the most exciting things for a lot of players. A lot of players will get very bored if you start with a social situation. You really want to introduce people to kind of the coolest parts of RPGs first, and if that's combat, or if you're particularly excited about certain aspects of combat, session 1 should begin with the players in the middle of a battle. That's something that Tim from Knights and Nerds did really well in the first season of Knights and Nerds. It wasn't necessarily combat, but the game started in the middle of a chaotic situation. And what's interesting about this is he did that without having the players already know each other. So, you can kind of bring this over. But if your players are already familiar with each other, you can kind of smash cut into the middle of one of their missions. In fact, I did this with the James Bond game that I ran. Unfortunately, it'll never see the light of day because it ended up being rather boring for listeners. The players enjoyed it, but listening to it would be kind of a chore. The James Bond RPG that I ran for James Bond Radio, I started them off in the middle of a mission. There wasn't a firefight going on, but I started them in the middle of a mission. They had an objective. They went right for it. So that's kind of the best way if you want to skip over all the nonsense, skip over the everyone's got to introduce their character, do their little vignette, have their, I'm sitting up against the wall in the tavern and nursing my drink and I look so grim and interesting. Understandably, if you want to skip that, that's fine. Throw them in the middle of a situation. Preferably a situation that leads into the rest of the campaign. So let's say you're running a campaign about, to use the example that I used on Knights and Nerds recently when talking about Tim, you're running that campaign about Sarkhan the One-Eyed, who is besieging the city. If you wanted to start that campaign right in the middle of things, your players would probably begin in one of the initial battles of that campaign of conquest that Sarkhan is running. He sends his soldiers out to, conquer this section of land between him and the city that he's ultimately set his sights on, set his eye on, since he only has one. So, one way, if you want to actively subvert the you start in a tavern thing, have everyone be in the tavern, and as soon as everyone's getting ready to kind of do their shady sitting up against the corner, hiding in the shadows of my cowl thing, have someone run in and go, "The village is under attack! To arms, men! To arms! The village is under attack!" And then, all right, roll for initiative. Or what do you want to do? Are you going to answer this? And if you have a party member who's like, "I'm not going to answer that," just be like, "Okay, there are soldiers that are bearing down on this town. They're going to kill you one way or the other. So you can either join them or join these people." Because, in all reality, if you're like an adventuring party typically is, and you're, a first to third level character at the beginning of a campaign, you already have a leg up on the average guardsman, or the average man-at-arms. And you're armed to the teeth. You've got some kind of weapons on you. There's something about you that's special, that sets you apart from the regular peasantry. So if an army invades the town that you guys are just chilling in, you're gonna have to do something. You're gonna be involved one way or the other, unless you run away from it and hide, which is, that's doing something. You can't just sit in the tavern and be like, "I'll have another round, please." Because eventually the soldiers are gonna come in, and they're gonna, be looking for recruits, or, looking to execute people. They're going to find you and be like, "You look like you can handle yourself. What do you want to do?" And if you're like, "Leave me alone, I'm just going to have a drink." And you'll be like, "Hey, when the king's men are speaking to you and, point swords at you." Basically, there's no way to not be involved in that situation, whether you're just going to observe the battle or you're going to actively participate in it. Because there is the understanding of, I don't know these people, I don't want to be involved in their politics. You as the GM need to set up a situation where inaction is not possible. You don't want to railroad your party with the situation that you put them in, although the opening of a campaign is one of the few times where you can railroad the party. Because you're at the beginning of a campaign. Something needs to spur them to action. So, giving them a little bit of jolt to get them going. If it feels a little bit railroady, it feels a little bit railroady. Because if the players want the option to do nothing and then just go back to the farm that they came from and work on their crops, you can play Harvest Moon. You don't have to show up here this evening and roll dice with us. If you just want to be a farmer, you can go play Stardew Valley. And, you can take this time to play Stardew Valley. Okay? Because the rest of us here want to play D&D. Which is something that Luke Hart has actually kind of expressed better than I ever could in one of his videos, talking about, you want your D&D character's occupation to basically be adventurer. It's okay if they came from an occupation or if they've got certain skills related to something, but it's, for the most part, you're not gonna want to end up being like a restaurateur in D&D. The rules aren't made for that. There's probably an RPG out there. Actually, there is one, Zhengshe, which is coming out soon. Just whenever they distribute it to backers, is about running a restaurant. It's also about fighting vampires, but it's about running a restaurant. So, if you want to run a restaurant in Chinatown of a 1930s metropolis, you can play Zhengshe. But if you want to play D&D, let's play D&D. So, create a situation, that's a side point, unrelated to the characters already knowing each other, but create a situation where inaction is not possible. One way or another, they have to make some kind of decision and do something. But, getting back to the players knowing each other, another good way to do it, if you're starting in the middle of combat, or if you're, just starting in the middle of a situation, know why the players are where they are. Give them a reason to be there. Otherwise, they don't have anything. And this can be done in a session 0 situation, or, you can reveal it beforehand. But, session 0 is where I like to do the everyone meets each other, and someone approaches you to hire the party, for whatever they, need them to do. But, have a reason, they're guarding a caravan. That's what I did in my Dark Sun game. Now, those players, again, the characters didn't know each other. But beside the point. Give them a purpose before the first person opens their mouth speaking in whatever voice they've decided to give their character. They should know what their characters are doing beforehand and why they all know each other. So, another situation that you could put your characters in where they all know each other, or, where they don't, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Maybe have them start in prison. That's another kind of cliched thing that people are beginning to turn against a little bit. But, having them begin in prison, kind of away from their gear that they selected, not as armed for bear, not as prepared to, fight a dragon or something like that. Having them begin in prison and having them try to find a way out of that prison, or, having the situation meet them there if you're doing a Suicide Squad type situation where they're recruited out of prison to go do something. Prison's another place where you could have people socialize with each other and socialize with the other inmates to find out the general goings-on of a kingdom. To use the Sarkhan example again, let's say instead of having it start with one of the preliminary battles of Sarkhan's campaign, the players begin knowing each other, they were a band of mercenaries hired to protect this town that got overrun by Sarkhan, and the campaign begins in one of his political prison camps. So, the players are in there with political prisoners of Sarkhan. They have no resources at this time, except for what, the people they know, based on the I know a guy rule that Tim talked about in Knights and Nerds and you've seen on the internet. Basically to explain that anytime it makes sense for a player to go, oh, I know a guy who can help with this challenge that's ahead of us. The kind of Lando Calrissian situation is the one that, Tim brought up where, they needed someone's help and Han goes out of nowhere. I know a guy who can do that, Lando. And so basically, this allows the player to create this NPC. And the rule is, the extent, basically the amount of help that this player is giving you, that this, this NPC is giving you, the amount of help, and how, helpful it'll be towards the campaign, towards accomplishing your goal, that raises how difficult it will be to get them to help. Or how difficult it will be to find them, or how difficult a situation that person may be in the case of Lando Calrissian, where Bespin was taken over by the Imperials. And seeking Lando's help ultimately kind of, led to the events of Luke confronting Vader, getting his hand cut off, and Han Solo being frozen in carbonite. But yeah, in a prison environment, that can be as simple as, I know a guy who's over in, cell block C, and, he's escaped from 6 different prisons. Let's see what he's got going on. Or, I know a guy who's one of the guards that we might be able to bribe, might be able to cajole. This helps them kind of get out of the situation. And in a prison environment where you've taken weapons away, magic users might still be able to use magic. Although without a spell book, a wizard can't memorize spells. So, you'll have to keep that in mind. Basically, you can do cantrips, and that's about it, wizards. You don't have your spellcasting focus if that's important to your casting. It encourages players to begin using their brains rather than we're going to, do this by force, although, force is still an option. But, it's a situation that might allow, the rogue or the face of the party to really shine. And it gives them a chance to get to know the characters, even if, you're in a situation where they already know each other. Because while the characters know each other, the players don't yet know everyone's character at the table. So there's still an aspect of kind of, getting to know you that you'll need to get out of the way there. So, middle of combat, middle of prison. Those are your options as far as starting things off. Basically, if you're beginning the campaign with the players already knowing each other, the best place to start is in the middle of things. So, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and discuss what to do when the players don't know each other, and different scenarios that you can present to them there. All right, we are back. So, let's talk a little bit more about beginning a campaign where the players don't already know each other. This is where it's a little bit challenging to do something outside of You Meet in a Tavern. Because You Meet in a Tavern is where characters can get to know each other. So, first things first, the things that I mentioned the things that I mentioned for players who do already know each other can also apply to players who don't. You can easily begin, like Tim did on Knights and Nerds, you can begin a campaign where the characters don't know each other in the middle of, pandemonium, conflict, a battle, something like that. You can also have them meet in prison, because, not everyone will be there for the same reasons. One thing that one of my GMs did that was interesting, it was fun for us as a group of veteran players. We'd been playing for a few years together at this time, so it was fun to shake things up. I would not recommend this as a regular starting point, because in D&D you kind of need to, let people be as powerful as they want to be. But what Ashley did, and we talked about this a long time ago when she was on the show, she started this campaign where the player characters knew each other, but we all woke up at the beginning of the campaign in the middle of a forest with no memory and no equipment. So, in theory, we all knew each other. We all had the same mark on us. It was like a claw smeared handprint type situation. We had that mark on us somewhere, but we had no equipment, and we didn't have any idea what our stats were. We had blank character sheets that had our name and basic information, because we could remember... we were missing roughly 5 years from our memory. We could remember stuff about, who we were. We woke up, we knew our names, knew, certain information, but we'd forgotten everything that had transpired over the past 5 years. We could remember before that, we could remember everything that was happening as we were going along, but there were 5 years that were just gone. So we didn't know each other. We did, but we didn't. We didn't know what our class was. We didn't know what level we were. So it was a process of kind of figuring all that stuff out as we went. And Ashley revealing to us, just over the course of, like if we had to make a roll, we could, then say, okay, I made, you need a perception check. I rolled this number. What do I add to it? And then she would say, okay, you add this. And we could surmise from that, okay, we have this bonus to this skill. Are we proficient? Maybe. Or do we have a very high score in this certain stat? And after a while, we just kind of started to piece together what our stats were and figured out kind of who our characters were. It was fun. It was a legitimately interesting experience. The whole point of that campaign in the beginning was to make us have that feeling of danger, excitement. We don't know what's going to happen over the course of, the first few sessions that a new player would have not knowing anything about D&D, because something that Ashley noticed in our campaigns was as we started going, if a monster popped up, inevitably someone or most everyone at the table would immediately go, oh, that's a beholder. And, not looking at the books, not cheating. Maybe cheating if depending on, meta knowledge. But a situation where someone goes, "Oh, that's a beholder." And in our heads we all know, okay, beholders do this, this, and this. They've got this weakness, essentially none. Again, beholders. Kill your party with beholders. That's one of the best ways to do it. Just outright murder your party with beholders, because you can do it easily. Beholders are no joke. Anyway, that is a kind of, sort of, their weakness is glitter. If I were to do that fight over again, that beholder would not have touched the ground and would not have been in range for that glitter dust spell. Because there are ways, but beholders can fly, and they've got very long range on their I-beams, and they can pick. Don't roll randomly for beholder I-beams. You choose which one you use. You spam that death ray. Anyway. Sorry. Anyway. Yeah, so that's a situation that kind of combines both of them, but you could have a situation where people kind of wake up in the middle of the woods and don't know where they are. Don't start a new player that way. Let a new player experience kind of the pure distillation of D&D. And I'll direct you back to what Hanker and Fernell and I discussed back in November. When you have a new player in D&D, the best way to introduce them to all that an RPG can offer is first give them as much power as possible. Let them see kind of the upper limits of how powerful their player can be. Let them experience kind of the top super mega high end of D&D or whatever RPG you're playing, and then once they have a taste at the very top, show them what kind of the darkest, grittiest, lowest magic situation is. If it's another game or if it's, a homebrew setting for D&D, show them that. Show them that and let them kind of work out where their happy medium is. You want to give players that kind of the lateral limits of what role playing can be, and then have them find their bliss in between those poles. So yeah. You could do that for experienced players if you want to cut down on meta knowledge. Use homebrew monsters, use monsters that people don't use very often. That's more campaign advice than starting advice. But yeah, starting them in the middle of the woods is a thing. Yeah. So let's see, other situations where you can have players meet up who don't necessarily know each other. Here's a variation on the you meet in the middle of something, or this could also be a variation on you meet in a tavern. Give every player in the beginning an objective that they are trying to accomplish within a centralized location. A way to think of this, or the example that I'll use, we'll keep with the Sarkhan the One-Eyed example. But instead of being in prison or in a town, the players are in Sarkhan's capital. They are attending a huge state function, dinner, gala, whatever, bacchanal, some kind of big party. A big central location, ball, event. Each of them has a separate goal. and one or more of the goals conflict with each other. Or maybe all of their goals kind of conflict with each other. Maybe someone is there to assassinate Sarkhan. Maybe someone is there, to begin, I don't know, a honeypot operation on one of the nobles of the court. Maybe someone is there as someone's companion, but they have their own agenda. Someone is there to recruit certain lords to their political side or their military side. Maybe someone is there just as a hired guard, but they have kind of their own secret agenda that they have kept hidden from everyone else. Find a way to get everyone to this single location, tell them separately, and then let it play out and let them kind of interact with each other as they would. And from there, you can build upon a campaign where, you can reveal that whoever got them to do these certain goals was trying to bring them together. Or, whoever... It's the same person who gave them these goals, and this person is betraying them. This person actually works for Sarkhan. Maybe he's Sarkhan's vizier. But give them a situation in which they are all working towards different goals in a single place, or maybe they're all working towards a common goal in a single place, just separately from each other. That will bring people together, have them interact, but have them interact in a way where they're not just sitting around talking, they're actively trying to do something. Or maybe even actively trying to disrupt each other. That creates a situation where you can introduce each other, you have things going on, you've got missions that can be accomplished, but you aren't necessarily sitting in a tavern. Now, a couple things I want to discuss, now that we've gone over a few scenarios here, a couple things I want to discuss about applying these to games outside of D&D. Some games already have the mechanics built in of how your players know each other. Slayers is a good example of this. I'm gesturing in the wrong direction. Slayers over there on my bookshelf. Your objective is you're hunting monsters. It doesn't matter whether or not you know each other. You are on a hunt. You're hunting monsters. That's what all of your characters do. Same with Blades in the Dark. You guys are a gang. You already know each other, or, you've just come together, but you're a gang. Your objective is to do gang stuff. Do hood rat things with your friends. But in, kind of more traditional RPGs, any of the Savage Worlds things, any of the, obviously Pathfinder is just a D&D-like situation with a different rule set. Any fantasy thing is going to, sufficiently be connected to D&D. With the possible exception of Pendragon, that not being as familiar with the rules there, how your party connects, that's something I'll have to look at once the new edition of Pendragon comes out and I'm able to look at that myself. Cyberpunk, any superhero RPG, a Star Wars RPG, there can be various, variations, situations that are similar to what I've discussed here that you can implement. It's just a matter of changing the set dressing. So, instead of it being Sarkhan the One-Eyed, all of your superheroes are in the city of Metroville when it's attacked by, the devious machinations of, the insane Dr. Cruelto. And he's unleashed a giant robot on the city. And all of your players are, maybe in their secret identities, or maybe they're already patrolling as their hero persona. But they all see this happen, and because they're heroes, need to respond to it. There's some kind of major event. Maybe like the Justice League of that world is defeated by... We'll keep using Dr. Cruelto. He has unleashed this ultimate super weapon, and Dr. Cruelto is a terrible name, I know, but he's unleashed this ultimate super weapon, and the heroes that normally handle this thing are dead. So your low-level heroes now kind of have to step up. You're basically Punisher-level vigilante who is using mostly just weapons and gadgets, now has to take the place of a Superman-like figure. Your heroes with just a couple of powers, they need to step it up. They need to, be better, because the heroes that they looked up to are dead now. That's a situation, similar to, starting in medias res, starting in the middle of something going on, and even the variation on starting with different objectives. If you're playing something like Classified, everyone's playing spies. You can have that same situation where everyone's kind of representing a different agency, or the agency has sent them all on similar assignments to the same mission. You see this in the first Mission Impossible movie, where Ethan and his IMF team are there, trying to protect the knock list. And there's a second IMF team that's there to see who the mole is, because the whole operation's a setup to, find out who is a mole, who's a mole within IMF. So, you see this in other genres as well. And you can take things from other genres and move them into fantasy as well. But yeah, one time that was super just disastrous was when I tried to do the You Meet in a Tavern thing in Deadlands. You all know about the Deadlands incident, where I changed it to You Meet in a Saloon. And bad stuff happened. That's why when I did my Star Wars one-shot with the same group, everyone already knew each other. I was like, we're not doing that again. Introduce your character real quick, just because you all know each other, say a little bit about them, and then, go from there. Yeah. But yeah, all of these tools that I've given you, I couch them in kind of a fantasy setting, because that's what I'm typically playing when I'm playing RPGs, but you can apply it to just about any scenario, any situation, any game, and you'll have a good kind of start point. Now, the last thing I want to discuss, circling back to You Meet in a Tavern. These are ways from a GM perspective and from a player perspective that you can make this chestnut, trope, whatever you want to call it, cliche, you can make it more palatable and less goofy, less, ridden with cliches. So that if you have a player who, is just like, oh, we have to meet in a tavern again, and they're just, super against it, you've got something to kind of mollify them. Some kind of variety, variance to this particular trope that you can show them. So the first way is, let's agree to do away with the sitting in a back booth, hood pulled up over his head, looking super edgy in the firelight, loner character, just being so cool and lonely, doing the Strider thing. Yes, Strider did it. I'm guilty of this, by the way. Am I guilty of this? I have not introduced my character in this way, ever. I thought, based on the kinds of characters that I like to play, I thought I would have done this, but the first time I played D&D and I introduced my Ranger character, I was walking into a tavern looking for the goblin that stole my quiver. And the second way that I introduced my character in Muhammad's game was I volunteered for the guards. I was part of a community of survivors of a magical Holocaust, and I showed up and was just like, "Here, I'll help out. I'll help these people." And I volunteered for my missions. So yeah, that's how I've introduced my characters in that situation. But yeah, the whole, describing your character and they're just oozing coolness and whatever, sitting in their corner booth, that's, let's dispense with that. I mean, you can say, they're sitting alone at the table because they came in alone. You don't have to try to recreate Strider at the Prancing Pony every single time you introduce your character, though, because that gets old really fast. Because chances are your character's not Strider. And it really sets the tone of you kind of being a tryhard. Now, the other things we need to dispense with. Let's see. PvP when the game first starts. And this is just from my own personal experience. Having your players fight each other is tedious. Conflict being present is completely understandable. That, it's going to happen. New people are not always going to get along, but having it devolve into some kind of fist fight or some kind of actual fight with swords, or even just a really intense Johnson measuring contest, that you're going to irritate the other players at the table, especially the one player who's okay, we're playing D&D, we're supposed to be a party, kind of the meta aspect of, we're supposed to get along because we're adventuring together, or we're supposed to agree to do this because we're adventuring together. Yeah, that kind of thing really, really slows the game down and really makes for an irritating, not very fun time. So keep in mind, players, when you're starting a campaign, you are starting a campaign. You're there to play D&D. It's generally advisable to say yes and when you're doing something like this that's, improvisational. Because when you say no, it doesn't move forward. And if you're using the excuse of, my character wouldn't do this, or that's what my character would do, stop it. Don't do that. Don't go down that road. There are certain scenarios in which, that's what my character would do when you're not causing pain to someone at the table, when you're not slowing the game down, when you're not, breaking stuff, being a jackass. If it's something that's legitimate role play, that's what my character would do is fine. That's not an excuse at that point. It's a reason. It's a good reason. But being that guy in any capacity, slowing things down, trying to kill one of the other players, that kind of stuff is just nonsense. And it weakens the foundation for certain characters. A good example of this, in my opinion, was a situation with one of Austin's characters. When he introduced a new character into the game. He was playing this tiefling monk who was basically edgy Batman. Kind of. Edgier Batman. Actual devil Daredevil. But the situation in which he entered the game started immediate combat, and we were all 7th level at this point, 6th or 7th level. So we could all hold our own. And the way in which he entered the game caused immediate PvP. And what resulted of this immediate PvP was Piper, David's character, dropped this character. Josiah was the character's name. Dropped Josiah in a matter of like a round and a half from the amount of damage that he was doing. Josiah did not last long in the campaign. He only lasted a couple sessions before Austin got sick of playing him, because it's really easy to burn out playing a monk. Honestly. Like, it's something you have to stick to, because monks are the only D&D class that's backloaded rather than front-loaded. You don't feel powerful as a monk until about 10th level. And you don't get as much, like, cool loot, because as a monk, you don't really need it. You're mostly using a quarterstaff and your fists. But, I digress. A situation where your character gets trounced by the other characters, or, you know, someone showing their ass and you, try to knock them down a peg and they end up beating you up, that's not a good situation to begin with a character. Don't do something that's going to immediately undermine your character or set up your character to be undermined. That's why I'm discouraging people from being the cool loner with their hood up in the dark corner of the tavern. Because you're trying to set up your character as really, really cool, and inevitably, when you do that, something is going to happen that's going to make that character not as cool as they were in your head. Someone, whether on purpose or by accident, is going to pants your character, and a little bit of what made this character so appealing in your mind is going to be lost. So don't set that up. Don't have a situation where someone feels the need to take your character down a peg, or you basically set the expectations sky high. At 3rd level, your character is going to be better than the average man-at-arms or peasant, even better than most knights at that point. As far as combat goes, if you're like a martial character. But you're not going to be you're not going to be the Butcher of Blaviken. You're not someone who killed an entire village or, fought an army single-handed. If you set up something like that with your character, prepare for the inevitable. Someone at the bar is going to challenge you, and if you roll like crap, then your reputation's gone. So be realistic with your expectations of your character when you're interacting with new characters. Don't set yourself up for something where your character is going to be undermined. And as a GM, don't set your players up in a position where they're going to undermine each other. One of my failings in the Deadlands incident was not immediately addressing the situation where a character was a bounty hunter and another character was a wanted fugitive. I should have couched that in different terms, so where they could be a bounty hunter and be a wanted fugitive as they had set their characters up to be, but not have them immediately come into conflict with each other. Because what happened was the fugitive ended up making an ass out of the bounty hunter, and that PvP went way longer than it should have. So, yeah. Don't do that. Don't have that situation pop off in your game, because your players are going to regret it. It's going to kind of turn them against each other at the table, unless they're, cool about things like that. So, yeah, just avoid that situation entirely. So, also, one last thing to discuss there. Have the, incidents that can bring a party together occur pretty quickly. Don't belabor the role play. Don't make it so difficult for your players to find something to do. Don't, basically don't leave any blank space. Immediately give them options. Have a barkeep, slip them a rumor or something like that. Have someone come up and ask them for assistance. Give them a reason to be there in the first place. Don't leave too much blank space, otherwise there's going to be a lot of idle chit-chat, silliness, the kind of stuff that really kind of tanks a first session, that makes a first session boring. Give them a purpose very quickly. Give them multiple options. And give them a reason to pursue it. You can't just say, here's a hook, and if it's not a good hook, expect them to follow it just out of, courtesy to you. Give them something that would interest them, based on the backstories that they've given you, the information they've given you about the character, and players, that's why backstories are important. You need to let your DM know what's going to be interesting to your character so that they can, give you something to work with. Because if, your character's not interested in the geopolitical situation going on in the kingdom, your GM constantly pushing you towards, let's see what's going on with Sarkhan the One-Eyed here. Your character or you as a player, you're not going to find that interesting, but you didn't give the GM any indication of what you would find interesting. So, give them something to work with. It doesn't have to be a novel, just give them something to work with. Some situation that brings them into the story. And with that, your GM will be able to kind of set the tempo early on and begin with an absolute banger of a session. And that's ultimately what we want to do to get everyone excited to come back to the table. Give them, something to talk about. So, guys, that is going to do it for today's Danishes and Dragons. Thank you so much for tuning in. I had fun talking about this. Come Monday, I've not yet decided what we're going to talk about. I'm looking for some guests to begin kind of filling things out. We're probably going to do something similar to this on Monday, though, because I don't have a guest lined up. But yeah, just stay tuned for that. I'll be putting updates on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for those of you who tuned into this. As always, the Monday show is still going on. Rollin Bones happens Mondays at 8 p.m. Central here at twitch.tv/RollinBonesRyan. Goes up on podcatchers and on YouTube on Wednesdays afterwards. So check that out. I thank you guys for everyone who's supported me so far. And whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I'll see you Monday.